The moment she said her grandmother's name, the entire town fell silent. Eleanor Whitaker hadn't planned to stay. The house sat alone at the edge of the forest, quiet in a way that felt almost deliberate. She came for signatures, not memories. But the moment her German shepherd stepped onto the property, something shifted. His posture, his focus, the way he refused to settle. And before long, it became clear. He wasn't reacting to the house. He was leading her to something hidden beneath it. If you were in her place, would you have kept digging? Or walked away the moment things stopped making sense? The road narrowed long before Eleanor noticed it. At first, it was just a subtle change. 2 lanes became 1. Fresh asphalt gave way to cracked patches, then to gravel that clicked softly under her tires. She drove slower without meaning to. The trees pressed closer, their branches leaning in like they had grown that way on purpose. She hadn't been back here in over 40 years, not since she was a girl riding in the passenger seat of her mother's old station wagon, counting fence posts and watching for deer at dusk. Back then, the road had felt longer, endless even. Now it seemed shorter. Or maybe she just didn't remember it clearly anymore. Eleanor Whitaker kept both hands steady on the wheel. 70 years old, and still driving herself into places most people her age had long stopped visiting. She told herself it was practical. There was a house to deal with, paperwork waiting, a lawyer expecting signatures. It was nothing more than that, just another task. In Knoxville, her life was quiet, predictable. A small brick home on a quiet street, neighbors who waved but didn't pry. A routine she had built carefully over the years. She liked it that way. Order, simplicity. This trip didn't belong to that life. The forest thickened. The signal on her phone dropped to 1 bar, then disappeared completely. She glanced at it once, then set it face down on the seat beside her. No point worrying about it now. A few more turns, a stretch of road that felt more like a path than anything maintained. And then, the clearing. She slowed to a stop without realizing she had lifted her foot from the gas. The house stood exactly where she remembered it. And yet, not quite the same. Smaller, maybe. Or maybe that was just her perspective now, standing at the far end of her life instead of the beginning. But it looked solid. More solid than she expected. The logs were dark with age, fitted tightly together. The roof dipped slightly at one corner, but it held. Everything about the place suggested endurance. Not comfort, not beauty, just staying. Eleanor turned off the engine. Silence settled immediately. Not the kind she was used to in Knoxville, where distant traffic hummed or a dog barked somewhere down the block. This silence had weight to it. It pressed in, filling the space where sound should have been. She sat there for a moment, hands still resting on the steering wheel. Then she exhaled. "Well," she murmured to herself, voice softer than she intended. "That's that." In the back seat, Bruno shifted. The German shepherd stood slowly, stretching his legs before stepping toward the open window. His nose lifted, testing the air. Ears forward. Body still. Eleanor opened the truck door and stepped out. The ground felt uneven under her boots, softer than she expected. The smell hit her next. Earth, old wood, something faintly metallic underneath it all. Bruno jumped down beside her. Usually he would circle once, check his surroundings, then settle close. He was a steady dog. Predictable. Today he didn't settle. He stood still, too still. His head turned slowly, scanning the tree line. Not in curiosity, in focus. Eleanor watched him for a second. "Bruno," she said lightly, "it's just trees." He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed somewhere beyond the house, somewhere deeper into the woods. His posture had changed. Weight forward, muscles tight under his coat. Alert. Eleanor frowned, just slightly. "Hey!" she called again, sharper this time. He turned his head then, meeting her gaze briefly. But instead of relaxing, he stepped away from her, moving a few paces toward the edge of the clearing. Listening. Eleanor followed his line of sight, but saw nothing. Just trees, bare branches scratching lightly against each other in the breeze she hadn't noticed before. She shook her head. "You've got a better imagination than I do," she muttered. It was easier to dismiss it. Dogs picked up on things, smells, sounds, animals passing through. Nothing unusual about that. Still, she glanced back at the house. It looked unchanged, not abandoned, not broken down, just waiting. That was the word that came to her. Waiting. Eleanor didn't like that thought. She picked up her keys from the truck seat and walked toward the front steps. The wood creaked faintly under her weight, a sound that felt louder than it should have in the stillness. Bruno didn't follow right away. He lingered behind her, still watching the tree line. "Come on," she said, not turning around. A pause. Then his paws thudded softly against the ground as he moved to catch up. By the time he reached the steps, his posture had changed again. Less rigid, more controlled, but not relaxed. Not entirely. Eleanor unlocked the door. The metal key scraped inside the lock, stiff from years without use. It turned eventually with a dull click. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she pushed the door open. The smell of old wood drifted out to meet her. Familiar. And not. She stepped inside without looking back. "Just a few days," she said under her breath, more to herself than anything else. "Get it done. Get it sold. Go home." Behind her, Bruno paused at the threshold. Eleanor didn't notice. She had already moved deeper into the house, her footsteps echoing faintly against the wooden floor. Bruno stood there a moment longer. Then he stepped inside. But as he did, his head turned once more, back toward the trees, as if something out there had followed them, or was still watching. And Eleanor Whitaker, busy brushing dust from a table she barely remembered, missed it entirely. To her, this was just a house, just another responsibility, something to close. She didn't yet understand. Some places aren't meant to be closed. They're meant to be opened, and they don't always wait quietly forever. Eleanor didn't sleep well. The house had settled around her in the night. Soft creaks, the slow shift of old wood cooling after the day's warmth. Nothing unusual, nothing she hadn't heard before in older homes. Still, she woke more than once. Each time Bruno was awake too, not pacing, not restless, just watching. By morning, she told herself it was the drive, the unfamiliar bed, the quiet most of all. She stood at the small kitchen sink, running cold water over her hands longer than necessary. The pipes groaned once, then steadied. Outside, the forest held its breath. No birds, no distant engines, not even wind, just stillness. "All right," she said aloud, drying her hands. "Let's get moving." There was a list in her mind. Always had been. Call the lawyer. Take inventory. See what could be sold. What needed to be cleared. It was easier to think in steps. Easier to avoid everything else. She grabbed her keys. Bruno was already at the door. Not waiting this time. Watching her. You coming? She asked. He didn't move until she opened the door. Then he stepped out ahead of her, pausing on the porch just long enough to scan the clearing again. Same as yesterday. Same tension. Eleanor frowned, but only briefly. Must be something out here, she muttered. The drive into town took less time than she expected. The road felt different in daylight. Less uncertain, more defined. Still narrow, still winding, but manageable. The town itself appeared gradually. A cluster of low buildings, faded signs, a gas station that looked older than she was. Nothing had changed much. Or maybe it had, and she just didn't know it well enough to see. She parked in front of a small grocery store, the kind with a hand-painted sign and windows cluttered with local flyers. Bruno stayed in the truck, watching through the glass. He didn't lie down. Eleanor noticed that. Stay, she said, tapping the door lightly. He held her gaze a moment longer than usual, then sat, but his eyes followed her all the way to the entrance. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Coffee, old wood, something fried lingering in the air. There were only a few people inside. An older woman near the back shelves. A man at the counter. Another sitting by the window with a newspaper folded neatly in his lap. Conversations were already low. They stopped completely when she walked in. Eleanor felt it immediately. That shift. Not loud. Not obvious. Just absence. She moved toward the counter, pretending not to notice. Picked up a small bottle of water she didn't really need. Morning, she said, placing it down. The man behind the counter nodded, didn't smile. Mornin'. His eyes lingered a second too long. Eleanor reached into her purse. I just got in yesterday, she added, casual. Haven't been back here in years. No response. She handed over the money. Whitaker Place still out past the ridge? She asked, more out of habit than intention. The effect was immediate. The man's hand paused over the register. Not frozen, just slower. Behind her, she heard the rustle of the newspaper stop. That's right, he said finally. His voice had changed, flatter. Eleanor nodded. My grandmother's place. Eleanor Whitaker. The name hung in the air. The older woman in the back glanced up, not curious, measuring. The man at the window lowered his paper just enough to look at her fully now. Eleanor felt the weight of it, didn't understand it. You don't say, the man behind the counter replied. No warmth in it, just acknowledgement. Been a while, she said. He nodded again, slower this time. Yeah, it has. A chair scraped softly near the window. The man with the newspaper stood and walked toward the counter. Not in a hurry, not slow either. Deliberate. He was older. Late 70s, maybe. Weathered face, sharp eyes that didn't miss much. He stopped beside her. You staying out there? He asked. Eleanor turned slightly, surprised at the directness. Just a few days, she said. Looking to sell. The man studied her, not rudely, but thoroughly. Name's Harold Pike, he said after a moment. She nodded. Eleanor. He didn't offer his hand, just leaned slightly on the counter. "That place, he began, then stopped. Eleanor waited. He seemed to reconsider his words. "Some things out here," he said carefully, "are better left alone." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning exactly. More like a statement. Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. "I'm just handling the property," she said. "Nothing more." Harold's gaze didn't shift. That was all he said. But it carried something. Something Eleanor couldn't place. The man behind the counter cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Anything else?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head. "No." She picked up the bottle and stepped back. As she moved toward the door, she could feel their eyes on her. Not hostile, not welcoming either. Just watching. The bell chimed again as she stepped outside. The air felt different, cooler. Bruno was already standing in the truck bed, front paws braced against the edge, ears forward, waiting. The moment she opened the door, he jumped down. Not playful, not relaxed. He moved past her immediately, circling once, then stopping, facing the road, then the trees, then back toward her. "What is it?" she asked, more sharply now. He didn't respond the way he usually would. Didn't come to her. Didn't wag. Just stood there, alert. Eleanor glanced back at the store. Through the window, she could still see them, watching. She turned away quickly. "Come on," she said, opening the passenger door. Bruno hesitated. Just a second. Then he climbed in. The drive back felt longer, quieter. She kept her eyes on the road, but her thoughts drifted. The way they looked at her. The way the name had settled in that room. And Harold Pike's words. "Some things are better left alone." She tightened her grip on the wheel. "It's just a house," she said under her breath. "Nothing more. Just a house." When they reached the clearing, the silence returned. Immediate. Heavy. The house stood exactly as she had left it. Unchanged. Bruno jumped down before she turned off the engine. He moved straight to the edge of the clearing again. Same spot. Same focus. Eleanor stepped out more slowly this time, watching him. He stood there, body still, facing the trees behind the house. Not moving, not blinking. Waiting. For what? She didn't know. And for the first time since she arrived, Eleanor didn't ignore it. She just stood there, listening. But whatever Bruno heard, the forest kept it to itself. Eleanor stood there longer than she meant to. The quiet pressed in again, heavier now. Not just silence, but awareness, the kind that made her feel like she had stepped into something already in motion. "All right," she said finally, more to break the stillness than anything else. "That's enough." Bruno didn't move. His ears twitched once, then again. A low sound rumbled in his chest. Not quite a growl. More like a warning he hadn't decided to act on yet. Eleanor turned away first. She wasn't going to stand out here imagining things. Inside, the house felt colder than it had that morning. Not in temperature. In presence. She closed the door behind her, the latch clicking louder than expected. The sound echoed down the narrow hallway, then disappeared into the stillness. Bruno followed, but not immediately. He paused at the threshold again, same hesitation as before. Then he stepped in, slower this time. Eleanor set the bottle of water on the kitchen table and took a breath. "Let's just get through this," she murmured. Work. That's what she needed. She pulled open a drawer, then another. Old utensils, wrapped carefully, not thrown together like most abandoned homes. Everything had its place, even the things that hadn't been touched in years. She moved into the main room. Dust should have been thicker. It wasn't. There was a thin layer, sure, but nothing like what she expected after so long. The surfaces felt maintained, as if time had passed through without settling. That bothered her more than if the place had been falling apart. She ran her hand across the table. Smooth. Clean. Strange, she muttered. Bruno was behind her now, but not close. He stayed near the doorway, watching. Not her. The hallway. Eleanor glanced over her shoulder. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer, of course, but his posture didn't change. That same quiet tension. She followed his line of sight. The hallway stretched toward the back of the house, narrow, dim even in daylight. The windows along that side were smaller, set higher in the wall. She hadn't noticed that before. Now she did. They weren't just small, they were placed deliberately, high enough that no one could look in easily, narrow enough to limit what came through. Light. Air. Anything else? Eleanor frowned. "Just old construction," she said under her breath. But the explanation felt thin. She walked toward the hallway anyway. Each step echoed slightly beneath her feet. The wood held firm, no soft spots, no give, stronger than expected for a house this old. Bruno didn't follow. That stopped her. She turned back. "Come on." He stayed where he was, his eyes fixed on her now. Not the hallway. On her. A quiet refusal. Eleanor hesitated. It wasn't like him. Bruno had followed her everywhere for years. Through cities, parks, long drives. He didn't hesitate. Not like this. She waited. He didn't move. "Suit yourself," she said finally, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. She turned back to the hallway. The air felt different there. Cooler. Still. She moved slowly, her hand brushing the wall as she passed. The wood felt thick beneath her fingers. Solid. Not just paneling, but layered. That thought stuck with her. Layered. The first door on the left opened easily. A bedroom. Simple. Narrow bed. Blanket folded neatly at the foot. No sign of use, Mom. But no sign of decay either. The air smelled faintly of cedar. Eleanor stepped inside, glanced around, then stepped back out. The second door was the same. Another bedroom. Sparse. Orderly. Unused, but not forgotten. She moved deeper. The third door didn't open right away. She turned the handle. Nothing. Locked. Eleanor straightened slightly. That hadn't been mentioned. She tried again. Firmer this time. Still nothing. Behind her, she heard Bruno shift, not moving forward, just reacting. A low sound, almost inaudible. Eleanor stepped back from the door. "All right," she said quietly. "We'll come back to that." She continued down the hallway. At the end, a narrow window let in a sliver of gray light, the kind that didn't warm anything. She stood there a moment, looking out. The trees were closer here, too close. The forest pressed up against the back of the house as if it had grown toward it over time. No clear boundary, no space, just proximity. Eleanor turned back. The hallway felt longer now. Bruno was still where she left him. He hadn't moved. "Stubborn," she said, though there was no irritation in it, only something else, something she didn't want to name. She stepped back into the main room. The air felt easier there, lighter. Bruno relaxed slightly as she approached, though not completely. His body loosened, but his ears stayed alert. "You don't like that hallway," she said. He blinked once, slow, not agreement, not denial, just awareness. Eleanor sank into the chair by the table. For a moment, she did nothing, just listened. The house made its quiet sounds again, wood adjusting, a faint shift somewhere deeper in the walls. Normal. She told herself that. Normal. But something lingered, a sense that the house wasn't empty, not in the way abandoned places usually were. It didn't feel hollow. It felt held, as if everything inside it had been left exactly where it needed to be. Waiting. Eleanor rubbed her hands together, trying to shake off the feeling. "Inventory," she said firmly. Back to the list. She reached for her bag, pulled out a notebook, and started writing. Rooms, furniture, condition, practical things, things that made sense. Across the room, Bruno settled onto the floor, but even as he lay down, his head stayed up, eyes open, watching. Not her, not the door, the hallway, always the hallway. And Eleanor, focused on her notes, didn't realize how often her own gaze drifted in that same direction, or how quickly the house had begun to change the way she saw it. By late afternoon, the light had shifted. It came in lower now, thinner, slipping through the narrow windows at an angle that stretched shadows across the floor. The kind of light that made ordinary things look unfamiliar. Eleanor closed her notebook. She had done enough for one day. The list was there. Rooms counted. Furniture noted. Nothing unexpected. At least nothing she could write down in a way that made sense. Still, something tugged at her. Not the hallway this time. Outside. She stood slowly, joints stiff from sitting too long, and glanced toward the back door, the one that led out past the narrow strip of grass and toward the tree line, toward the shed. She hadn't gone there yet. Had seen it, of course. Impossible not to. It sat just beyond the clearing, partially tucked into the trees, bigger than she remembered, or maybe just more present now. "Let's take a look," she said, mostly to fill the silence. Bruno was already standing. He didn't hesitate this time. That alone made her pause. "All right," she muttered. "Guess we're doing this." The back door opened with more resistance than the front. The wood had swelled slightly, the hinges stiff but still holding. Outside, the air felt cooler, not colder, just heavier. The grass beneath her boots gave slightly with each step, damp from the shade, from years of little use. The ground wasn't overgrown, though, not wild, maintained. That thought came again. Not abandoned, not forgotten, maintained. The shed stood about 30 yards from the house, far enough to feel separate, close enough to matter. As Eleanor approached, She noticed the construction. The beams were thick, thicker than they needed to be for a simple storage building. The wood had darkened with age, but the structure hadn't warped. No sagging, no obvious weakness. It had been built to last. More than the house, maybe. "That's something," she said under her breath. Bruno moved ahead of her now, not running, walking with purpose. His nose lowered as he crossed the final stretch, sniffing the ground in short, controlled bursts. His tail was level, not wagging, focused. He reached the door first, stopped, waited. Eleanor stepped up beside him. The door was heavy, solid planks reinforced with crossbeams that had been bolted in place, not nailed. Iron brackets, rusted but intact, held everything together. She reached for the handle, cold, colder than the air. She hesitated, then pulled. The door opened with a slow, dragging sound. Not loud, but enough to break the stillness around them. Inside, the light fell short. The interior stayed dim, even with the door wide open. Eleanor stepped in first. The smell hit her immediately. Wood, dust, and something else. Metal, old, worn metal. She let her eyes adjust. The space was larger than she expected. Empty, mostly, but not unused. Along the walls she saw hooks, thick iron ones driven deep into the beams. Some bent slightly, as if they had held weight over time. Chains hung from a few of them, loose, unfastened. Eleanor's breath caught, just slightly. "That's—" she started, then stopped. No explanation came. She stepped further in. The floorboards creaked beneath her weight, but they held. Solid, reinforced, like the rest of the structure. Her eyes moved slowly across the space. There were marks, not random, lines carved into the wood. Deep scratches, running in uneven directions, some clustered together, others spaced apart, as if something had been dragged across the surface more than once. Eleanor crouched slightly, brushing her fingers over one of the marks. It was old, not fresh, but it hadn't softened with time the way she expected. Bruno moved past her, deeper into the shed. His movements changed again. Quicker now, more intent. He circled once, then again. His nose stayed low, tracing the ground in tight loops. He stopped near the center of the room, sniffed hard, then shifted a few feet to the side. Back and forth, same area. Over and over. "Bruno," Eleanor called softly. He didn't respond, didn't even look up. She stood slowly, watching him. "What is it?" His tail stiffened, not raised, not lowered, just still. He pawed once at the floor, then again. Not digging, testing. Eleanor stepped closer. The boards looked no different than the rest. Same wood, same wear, nothing obvious. "It's just old flooring," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Bruno circled again, stopped, lowered his head and pressed his nose to the exact same spot. Held it there, breathing in. Slow, deliberate. Eleanor felt it then. Not fear, not yet, but something close. A sense that she was standing at the edge of something she didn't understand. Something the house hadn't shown her yet. She took a step back. "All right," she said, more firmly this time. "That's enough for today." Bruno didn't move. She reached for his collar gently. "Come on." He resisted, not pulling away, not aggressive, just refusing. His body leaned forward, weight anchored, like he wasn't done. Eleanor tightened her grip slightly. "Bruno." He looked up at her then, eyes sharp, focused, and something else. Urgency. It passed quickly, but she saw it. Really saw it. For the first time since they arrived, a long second stretched between them. Then, slowly, he stepped back. Not willingly, but enough. Eleanor exhaled. "Good," she said quietly. They moved toward the door together. She didn't look back at the floor. Didn't want to. Outside, the air felt different again. Lighter, or maybe just less contained. Eleanor closed the shed door behind them, the wood settling into place with a dull thud. She stood there a moment, looking at it, at the thickness of the beams, at the way it stood, separate from the house. Stronger, more deliberate. "This isn't just storage," she said under her breath. The thought came uninvited and stayed. Bruno moved past her, heading back toward the house, but not before he glanced once more at the shed, at that spot inside, the one he hadn't wanted to leave. Eleanor followed, slower this time, her steps more measured. Behind them, the shed stood quiet again, unchanged, but no longer unnoticed. And that night, for the first time since arriving, Eleanor locked the back door, not out of habit, but because something inside her told her to. Eleanor stood for a moment after locking the door, her hand still resting on the cold metal. The click of the latch had sounded final, too final. She turned slowly. Bruno was already in the middle of the room, but he hadn't settled. His body was angled toward the back of the house again, toward the direction of the shed. His ears flicked once, then stilled. "You're not done with that, are you?" she said quietly. He didn't move. Eleanor let out a slow breath and rubbed her hands together, as if trying to shake something off. The air inside felt tighter now, the walls closer. She walked into the kitchen, opened a cabinet, then closed it again without taking anything. The routine felt thin, forced. Her thoughts kept drifting back, to the shed, to the floor, to the way Bruno had looked at her, urgent. That wasn't imagination. She knew her dog, had known him long enough to trust what he reacted to, even when she didn't understand it. "You're tired," she said to herself. "That's all." But the words didn't settle. Night came faster than she expected. The forest swallowed the last of the light without warning, leaving the house in a soft, dim quiet. Eleanor lit a lamp instead of the overhead fixture. It felt better, less exposed. Bruno paced, not constantly, but enough. He would walk to the door, stop, turn, cross the room, then back again. His nails clicked softly against the wood, a steady rhythm that made it impossible to ignore him. "Lie down," she said once. He didn't. Not right away. Eventually, he lowered himself near the door, but his head stayed up, eyes open, watching, waiting. Eleanor sat in the chair again, her notebook still open in front of her. The words she had written earlier looked distant now. Unimportant. She closed it. "All right," she said quietly into the room. "What is it?" Bruno lifted his head slightly. That was all. No barking, no whining, just attention. Eleanor leaned back in the chair and stared at the door. The silence stretched. Then, a sound. Faint. Outside. Not loud enough to place, just something. She sat up. "Did you hear that?" Bruno was already on his feet. The low sound returned to his chest. Not fear. Warning. Eleanor stood slowly. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to stay where she was, to wait it out. But Bruno didn't move away. He moved closer to the door, pressed his nose near the seam, breathing in. Focused. Eleanor hesitated, then reached for the handle. She paused before opening it. Just a second, then pulled. The door opened into darkness. The clearing looked the same. Still. Empty. The trees stood silent, their outlines barely visible against the night sky. Nothing moved. Nothing approached. Eleanor stepped out onto the porch. "Hello?" she called. Her voice felt too loud. It disappeared quickly into the trees. No answer. Bruno stepped out beside her, but not past her. He stayed close now. That was different. His body angled slightly in front of hers. Protective. Eleanor scanned the clearing again. Nothing. She shook her head. "Probably an animal," she said. But she stepped back inside anyway. Closed the door. Locked it again. This time her hand lingered on the lock longer. Bruno didn't settle. Not even after that. He paced again. Slower now. More controlled, but persistent. Eleanor didn't try to stop him. She watched. And the longer she watched, the clearer it became. He wasn't reacting to the house. He wasn't reacting to the forest. He was reacting to something specific, something he had found, something he hadn't finished with. The shed, the floor, that exact spot. Eleanor stood abruptly. "That's it," she said. Bruno stopped, turned toward her. Their eyes met, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in him, no uncertainty, just confirmation. She grabbed her coat. "Tomorrow," she said firmly, "we go back out there, properly." Bruno didn't move, but his posture shifted. The tension didn't disappear, but it changed. Less restless, more focused, as if that decision mattered. Eleanor walked toward the hallway without thinking. Stopped. Bruno's head turned immediately. Back to the hallway. Same reaction as before. She froze, then slowly stepped away from it. "Not tonight," she murmured. She returned to the main room and sat down again. The house settled around her. Same sounds, same quiet. But something had shifted. Not outside. Inside. Her. The decision had been made. She wasn't leaving it alone. And Bruno. He finally lay down. Not fully relaxed, but still. Eyes open. Watching. Not the door. not the trees, but her, as if making sure she didn't change her mind. Eleanor didn't. Morning came slowly. A pale gray light filtered through the narrow windows, stretching across the floor in thin, uneven lines. The house felt quieter than before, if that was even possible. Still, holding its breath. Eleanor was already awake. She hadn't slept much, not deeply. Every small sound had pulled her up just enough to remind her where she was and why. She sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. The coffee had gone cold. Bruno stood near the door, not pacing this time, waiting. His body was still, focused, as if the night had settled something inside him. Eleanor pushed the chair back. "All right," she said softly. No hesitation now. She grabbed her coat, slipped it on, and reached for the keys out of habit, then stopped. No need. They weren't going anywhere. She opened the back door. The air outside felt sharper, cleaner. The forest still wrapped around the clearing, unchanged, watching. Bruno stepped out first. No pause this time. No scanning. He moved with purpose. Straight toward the shed. Eleanor followed. Each step felt heavier than it should have. Not physically, something else. A quiet pressure building with every footfall. She didn't speak. Didn't want to break whatever had already begun. The shed stood where it had always been. Solid, unmoving. But now it felt different. Not just a structure, a boundary. Bruno reached the door and stopped only long enough for her to catch up. Then he looked at her. Not waiting, expecting. Eleanor pulled the door open. The same slow drag of wood. The same dim light inside. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. Bruno stepped in immediately. No circling this time. No hesitation. He went straight to the center of the floor. That spot. Eleanor followed more slowly. Her eyes moved across the room again. The chains, the hooks, the marks in the wood. But they didn't hold her attention now. Only the floor. Only where Bruno stood. He lowered his head and pressed his nose to the boards, held it there, then pawed. Once, twice, harder this time. A dull sound echoed beneath it. Not hollow exactly, but not solid either. Eleanor felt it in her chest. "That's not just flooring," she whispered. Bruno looked up at her. Again. That look urgent. Eleanor stepped closer, knelt carefully, ran her hand over the wood. It looked like the rest. Same grain, same wear. But now that she was closer, there. A faint line. Almost invisible. A seam. Her fingers traced it slowly. "Yes, I see it." Bruno shifted beside her, watching closely now. Eleanor stood, looked around. There had to be something. Tools. She scanned the edges of the shed and found an old crowbar leaning against the wall, half hidden behind a stack of warped boards. She picked it up. It was heavier than she expected. Cold. Real. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. But she stepped back to the spot anyway, positioned the end of the bar along the seam, pressed. Nothing. She adjusted her angle, pressed harder. The wood groaned faintly. A small shift. Bruno stepped back, giving her space, watching. Eleanor repositioned again, pushed with both hands. This time, a crack. Sharp. The board lifted slightly. Dust rose in a thin cloud. Eleanor froze. Then slowly, carefully, she wedged the crowbar deeper, pulled. The board came up, not easily, but enough. Enough to reveal darkness beneath. A gap. Cold air rose from below, stale, closed. Eleanor stepped back. Her breath caught. "That's—" she began, but couldn't finish. Bruno moved forward again. Closer to the opening, his body had changed. No more tension, no hesitation, just certainty. Eleanor forced herself to move, kneeled again, set the crowbar aside, used her hands now, pulled the loosened board free, then another, and another. The opening widened, revealing a hatch, hidden just beneath the surface, wooden, reinforced, set into a frame that blended perfectly with the rest of the floor. Eleanor stared at it. Her hands trembled slightly. This was meant to stay hidden. The words came without thinking. Bruno stepped beside her, sat, calm, as if this was the moment he had been waiting for. Eleanor reached for the edge of the hatch, paused, just for a second, then pulled. It didn't move at first. She tightened her grip, pulled again. This time, it gave, with a slow, heavy sound. The hatch lifted, revealing a narrow opening below. Dark, deep, the air that rose from it was colder, denser, carrying the smell of old wood and something else, something lived in. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, trying to see. Nothing but shadow. "Stay," she said quietly. Bruno didn't move, but his eyes stayed locked on the opening. Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. No signal, but the flashlight still worked. She turned it on. A thin beam of light cut into the darkness below, revealing steps, wooden, narrow, leading down, carefully built, not makeshift, not accidental, intentional. Eleanor's breath slowed. Her heart didn't. "This isn't storage," she whispered. She shifted her weight, placed one hand on the edge of the opening, the other holding the light. She hesitated. Not out of fear, out of understanding. Whatever this was, it wasn't simple, it wasn't forgotten, and it wasn't meant to be found easily. Bruno stood, stepped closer. Then, without waiting, he moved past her, placed one paw on the first step, paused only long enough to look back, then continued down. Calm, certain, gone into the dark. Eleanor stared after him. "Bruno." Her voice echoed slightly into the space below. No response. Only the faint sound of his movement. Steady, unafraid. Eleanor swallowed, then followed. One step, then another. The wood held, strong, like everything else here. The light from above faded quickly as she descended. The air changed, cooler, heavier, still. And then, her foot touched the bottom. She stepped fully into the space, raised the light, and saw blankets, folded, placed deliberately along one wall, metal fixtures set into the beams, hooks, not scattered, arranged, organized, used. Bruno stood in the center of it all, still, calm, as if he had finally reached the place he had known was there all along. Eleanor's chest tightened. Not fear, something deeper. Recognition. This place, her voice barely carried, was never meant to be empty. And for the first time since she arrived, she understood. She hadn't just found something hidden. She had stepped into something that had been waiting for a very long time. Eleanor stood still, the beam of her phone trembling slightly in her hand. The space beneath the shed wasn't large, but it wasn't crude either. It had been built with care. The walls were reinforced with thick beams, the same kind she had seen above, cut precisely, fitted tightly. The ceiling was low but not cramped, enough room for someone to stand without stooping too much, or for several people to sit. Wait. Survive. The blankets were folded in stacks along one side. Old, but not rotten. Preserved in a way that spoke of intention. Nothing here had been left by accident. Bruno moved slowly across the floor, sniffing along the edges, then pausing near the far wall. No tension now, no urgency, just recognition. Eleanor followed the direction of his gaze. More fixtures, metal loops set into the wood, not scattered, placed evenly, measured. Her breath slowed. This wasn't for animals, she whispered. The thought came with a quiet certainty. She stepped closer, her light tracing the space again. Corners, floor, ceiling. Everything held together with the same deliberate strength. No signs of panic, no signs of chaos, only preparation. She turned slowly, took it in, and for the first time, something settled inside her. Not understanding, not yet, but the shape of it. This place had a purpose, and someone had gone to great lengths to make sure it worked. A faint sound above her made her freeze. Not loud, just a shift. Wood. Footsteps. Eleanor's head snapped upward. Bruno, she said quietly. He was already looking toward the opening. Ears up, body still. The sound came again. Closer this time. Not hurried. Deliberate. Someone was in the shed. Eleanor's grip tightened on her phone. Her mind raced through possibilities. None of them clear. None of them comforting. Then, a voice. Hello? Old, female. Careful. Eleanor let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Down here, she called, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. A pause. Then the sound of movement above. The outline of a figure appeared at the opening, blocking what little light filtered down. For a moment, they both remained still. Then the woman leaned forward slightly, peering into the darkness. Well, she said quietly, you found it. Eleanor stepped back instinctively. Who are you? The woman took her time answering. She descended slowly, one step at a time, her hand steady against the wall as she moved. When she reached the bottom, Eleanor could see her clearly. Late 70s, maybe older. Her face was lined, weathered, but her eyes were sharp, alert in a way that suggested she missed very little. "I'm Lydia Mercer," she said. Eleanor blinked. The name didn't mean anything to her. "I didn't expect anyone out here," Eleanor replied. Lydia gave a small nod. "Didn't expect to see anyone down here either." Her gaze moved around the space. Not surprised. Not confused. Familiar. That alone shifted something in Eleanor's chest. "You knew about this," Eleanor said. Not a question. Lydia met her eyes. "Yes." The answer came easily. No hesitation. Eleanor let out a slow breath. "Then maybe you can tell me what this is." Lydia didn't answer right away. She walked slowly along the wall, her hand brushing lightly against the wood, the metal fixtures, the blankets, like she was remembering something rather than discovering it. "This place," Lydia began, then paused. Her voice softened. "Kept people alive." Eleanor felt the words land. Not dramatic, not exaggerated. Simple. Real. "Alive from what?" Eleanor asked. Lydia turned toward her. Her expression changed slightly. Not guarded. Measured. "From the kind of trouble that doesn't knock on the front door," she said. Eleanor frowned. "That doesn't explain the chains, or this." She gestured around the space. Lydia nodded slowly. "No," she said. "It doesn't." She stepped closer, lowered her voice slightly, though there was no one else there. "Your grandmother built this after the winter of '78, Lydia said. Eleanor's breath caught. "My grandmother." Lydia studied her for a moment. "You didn't know?" It wasn't a question. Eleanor shook her head. "No, I didn't know any of this." Lydia exhaled quietly. "Most people don't. Not all of it." She moved toward the center of the room, standing where Bruno had been earlier. "Heard you were back," she continued. "Town talks, even when it pretends not to." Eleanor thought of the store, the way they had looked at her. "Then why didn't anyone say anything?" she asked. Lydia's lips pressed together slightly. "Because it wasn't simple." Eleanor waited. The silence stretched just long enough to matter. Then Lydia spoke again. "There were people passing through these mountains back then," she said. "Folks who didn't have anywhere else to go. Some running from bad situations. Some brought into worse ones." Eleanor listened, every word settling heavier than the last. "Your grandmother," Lydia continued, "she didn't turn them away." Eleanor's chest tightened. "She hid them?" Lydia nodded. "Fed them, kept them warm. Gave them a place to stay until it was safe to move on." Eleanor glanced around the room again. The blankets, the fixtures, the design. "It wasn't just kindness," Lydia added quietly. "It was planning." Eleanor looked at her. "What do you mean?" Lydia's gaze moved upward, toward the ceiling. "The shed, the way it's built, the chains on the doors upstairs. Those weren't for keeping people in." She paused. "They were for keeping other people out." Eleanor felt a chill move through her. "Who?" she asked. Lydia didn't answer right away. Her silence said enough. "Not everyone approved of what she was doing," Lydia said finally. "Some thought she was bringing trouble into the area. Some were afraid. Some..." She hesitated. Didn't want to get involved at all. Eleanor swallowed. And the town? Lydia's expression shifted again, a trace of something heavier. The town knew enough, she said. But knowing and speaking are two different things. Eleanor let that sit. The weight of it. The silence that had followed. The looks. The warnings. They've been carrying that quiet for a long time, Lydia added. Bruno moved closer to Eleanor, brushing lightly against her leg. Grounding. Present. Eleanor rested her hand on his back without thinking. And you? She asked Lydia. Why are you telling me this now? Lydia met her eyes again. Because you found it. She didn't say it out loud, but it was there. In the way she stood. In the way she didn't look away. This place wasn't meant to stay hidden forever, Lydia said softly. Eleanor looked around once more. The room no longer felt empty. It felt full of something she hadn't been part of, something she had just stepped into, without warning, without preparation. And now, without a way to ignore it. Bruno shifted slightly beside her, calm, certain, as if he had already accepted what she was only beginning to understand. And Eleanor, she knew, whatever she had come here to do, it wasn't going to be that simple anymore. Eleanor climbed out of the underground space slowly, her legs heavier than before. Lydia went up first, steady despite her age, not once reaching back for help. When Eleanor emerged into the dim light of the shed, it felt different. Smaller, colder, as if what lay beneath it had changed the air above. Bruno followed last, stepping up without hesitation. The moment his paws hit the wooden floor, he exhaled, long, quiet, and for the first time since arriving, his body loosened. Not completely, but enough. Eleanor noticed that. She noticed everything now. She stood there, brushing dust from her hands, but her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. That was real, she said under her breath. Lydia gave a small nod. Always was. Eleanor turned toward her. You said people came here, that she helped them. But why all of this? She gestured around the shed, the reinforced beams, the chains, the hidden space. This wasn't just shelter. This was something else. Lydia leaned lightly against one of the support posts, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood like she had done it 1,000 times before. Your grandmother didn't wait for trouble to arrive, she said. She prepared for it. Eleanor let that sit. Prepared. The word didn't feel abstract anymore, not after what she had seen. Prepared for who? Eleanor asked quietly. Lydia looked toward the open door, out at the trees. For men who came looking, she said. The words landed without force, but they stayed. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. Looking for who? Lydia's eyes shifted back to her. For the people she was hiding. Silence followed. Not empty. Full. Eleanor glanced down at the floor, then back toward the opening where the hatch lay hidden beneath the boards. You said the town knew, she said. Why didn't anyone stop it? Or help? Lydia's expression didn't change. Because helping would have meant choosing a side, she replied. And most people don't do that unless they have to. Eleanor thought of the store again. The silence. The way they had looked at her. They chose not to see it, she said. Lydia gave a faint nod. Some did more than that. Some were afraid what it would bring here. Others, she paused, thought it wasn't their problem. Eleanor let out a slow breath. And now? Lydia didn't answer right away. Instead, she pushed off the post and walked toward the far side of the shed. There, tucked between two beams, she reached behind a loose board and pulled something free. A bundle, wrapped in cloth, carefully. Eleanor watched, her pulse steady but heavy. "What is that?" she asked. Lydia turned back, holding it with both hands. "Something your grandmother left," she said. Eleanor stepped closer. Lydia handed it to her without ceremony. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it carried weight anyway. Eleanor unwrapped it slowly. Inside, papers, old, worn at the edges but preserved, handwritten pages, folded documents, names, lists. She flipped one open. Dates, short notes, supplies. Another page. Names again. More this time. Each one written carefully, deliberately. "Those are the people who came through here," Lydia said quietly. "The ones she could help." Eleanor swallowed. There were more pages underneath. She turned another. A different kind of writing. More formal, official. Permits, letters, requests, denied. She frowned. "She tried to go through proper channels," Eleanor said, more to herself than to Lydia. Lydia nodded. "For a while." Eleanor looked up. "And then?" And then she stopped asking. The words were simple, but they shifted something. Eleanor's grip tightened slightly on the papers. She did it anyway. "Yes," Eleanor exhaled. The realization came in pieces. Her grandmother hadn't just helped quietly. She had chosen to act when no one else would, and she had done it knowing exactly what it might cost. Eleanor looked down again. There were marks next to some of the names. Small notations. Dates with no follow-up. She hesitated. "What about these?" she asked, pointing. Lydia's expression softened. Not all of them made it through. The answer came without words. Eleanor didn't ask again. The silence that followed was different now. Not uncomfortable. Heavy. Earned. Bruno moved closer to her side, his body brushing lightly against her leg, grounding her. She rested her hand on his head, absent-minded, steady. "She kept all of this," Eleanor said quietly. Lydia nodded. She kept records, supplies, plans, everything she thought might be needed again. Eleanor looked up sharply. "Again?" Lydia held her gaze. "Your grandmother didn't think what happened here was a one-time thing," she said. "She thought it was something the world could repeat." Eleanor felt that settle deep, not as fear, as recognition. The house, the shed, the underground space, none of it had been built for a single moment. It had been built for possibility, for return. She looked back at the documents in her hands, at the names, at the care in each line. "This isn't just history," she said. "No," Lydia replied. "It isn't." Eleanor wrapped the papers again slowly, more carefully than she had opened them. "What did the town do after?" she asked. Lydia took a long breath. Nothing, she said. The word hung there. Final. They went back to their lives, their routines. They let it fade, because remembering would have meant admitting something. Eleanor met her eyes. What? That they had a choice, Lydia said, and most of them didn't take it. The weight of that settled deeper than anything else. Not anger, not blame. Something quieter. Eleanor looked toward the open door of the shed. The forest beyond it. The town somewhere past that. They remember now, she said. Lydia's mouth curved slightly. Some of them never forgot, she replied. Eleanor nodded slowly. She believed that. Now she did. Bruno shifted again beside her. Calm. Still. The urgency was gone. Whatever he had been searching for, he had found it. Eleanor stepped toward the door, paused, then turned back to the shed one last time. Not with unease, not anymore. With understanding, partial, but real. This place, she said quietly. Lydia finished the thought. Was never just a house. Eleanor didn't respond. She stepped outside. The air felt different again. Not lighter. Clearer. The trees stood as they had before, unchanged. But she saw them differently now. And as she walked back toward the house, she knew. The silence she had felt since arriving. It hadn't been emptiness. It had been something held back, something waiting. And now, it wasn't hidden anymore. Eleanor didn't go back inside right away. She stood at the edge of the clearing, the papers still in her hands, wrapped carefully again, but no longer forgotten. The forest stretched out in front of her, quiet as ever. But the silence had changed. It no longer felt like something withheld. It felt like something known. Bruno stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the steady warmth of him through her coat. He wasn't watching the trees anymore. He was watching her. Eleanor let out a slow breath. I came here to sell it, she said quietly. The words felt distant now, like something she had decided long ago, without understanding what she was deciding about. Behind her, Lydia didn't move. Most people do, she said. Eleanor turned slightly. But you didn't, she replied. Lydia gave a faint shrug. Some things don't feel like property once you know what they are. Eleanor looked back at the house. It stood exactly the same. Nothing about it had changed, except everything had. The reinforced doors, the narrow windows, the shed, the space beneath it. All of it had meaning now, purpose. She tightened her grip on the bundle. I need to go into town, she said. Lydia nodded once. Figured you might? There was no surprise in her voice, no question, just quiet understanding. Eleanor walked back to the truck without another word. Bruno followed immediately this time. No hesitation, no scanning. He jumped in and settled quickly. Calm. For the first time since they arrived, he looked finished. Not tired. Resolved. Eleanor noticed that. She started the engine. The sound broke the stillness of the clearing in a way that felt almost intrusive. As she drove away, she didn't look back. Not because she didn't want to, because she didn't need to. The road into town felt different now. Clearer, shorter. Or maybe she just wasn't avoiding anything anymore. When she pulled up to the store, the same truck was parked out front. Same place. Nothing had moved. Eleanor stepped out. Bruno stayed this time without needing to be told. He lay down in the back seat, head resting, but eyes open, watching. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. The same people were inside. The same arrangement. But the silence came faster now. Stronger. They recognized her before she spoke. Eleanor walked straight to the counter. Didn't browse. Didn't hesitate. "I need to talk," she said. The man behind the counter, same as before, looked at her carefully. "About what?" Eleanor set the bundle down in front of him, not unwrapping it, just placing it there. "My grandmother," she said. That was enough. Harold Pike stood from his chair near the window. He didn't rush, but he didn't stay back either. He came closer. Close enough to hear, close enough to be part of it. Eleanor looked between them. "I've been out there," she said. "In the shed. Under it." The reaction was small, almost invisible, but it was there. A tightening, a glance, something unspoken passing between them. Harold's voice came low. "You shouldn't have gone digging." Eleanor held his gaze. "It wasn't me," she said. A small pause. Then, "My dog found it." Harold looked past her briefly, as if he could see Bruno through the walls, then back again. "And now you know," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," Eleanor replied. "Now I understand." The difference mattered. Harold studied her, longer this time. "Do you?" he asked. Eleanor didn't answer right away. She reached down, unwrapped the cloth, and opened the bundle just enough for the papers to show. The names, the records, the proof. The room went quieter, if that was even possible. The man behind the counter shifted slightly. The older woman in the back lowered her eyes. No one spoke. Eleanor's voice was steady. "She didn't just live there," she said. "She built something. She protected people." No one argued. No one corrected her. That was the answer. Harold's jaw tightened slightly. "We didn't ask her to," he said. Eleanor nodded. "I know." That stopped him. She continued. "But she did it anyway." Another pause. This one heavier. The kind that carries memory. "You all knew," Eleanor said. Not accusing. Not loud. Just clear. Harold exhaled slowly. "Some of us did." "And the rest?" "They knew enough." Eleanor glanced around the room, at the faces that wouldn't quite meet her eyes, at the ones that did, but briefly. "They still do," she said. Harold didn't deny it. The silence shifted, not defensive anymore, not guarded, something closer to acknowledgement. "You're not selling, are you?" he asked. The question came quietly, carefully. Eleanor looked down at the papers in her hands, then back up. "I don't know yet," she said. It was the truth, but not the whole truth. Not anymore. Harold nodded once. "Fair enough." The man behind the counter cleared his throat. "People remember," he said, "even if they don't talk about it." Eleanor looked at him. "Why didn't you?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, because talking means you have to admit what you didn't do. The honesty of it settled in the room. No one challenged it. No one softened it. Eleanor wrapped the papers again. Slowly. Carefully. When she was done, she picked them up, held them close. "I'm going back," she said. Harold stepped aside, not blocking her, not stopping her, just making space. As she walked toward the door, the bell chimed again, but this time, no one looked away. No one pretended. They watched, openly, as if something had shifted. Outside, the air felt clearer again. Bruno lifted his head as she approached. Not alert, not tense, just present. She opened the door and got in, sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, thinking. Then she spoke. Not to Bruno, not to herself, just into the space. "It's not over." Bruno's ears twitched slightly, but he didn't move. He didn't need to. As Eleanor started the engine and pulled away from the town, she already knew. The decision she had come here to make was no longer the one she would leave with. Eleanor didn't rush back. She drove slower this time. Not because the road demanded it, but because something inside her had shifted its pace. The urgency that had brought her here days ago, the need to finish, to close, to move on, had thinned out into something quieter, more deliberate. The forest looked different now. The same trees, the same bends in the road. But she noticed things she hadn't before. The way the light moved between branches. The way the land rose and dipped gently beneath it all. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. When the clearing came into view, Eleanor eased the truck to a stop just short of the house. She didn't get out right away. Bruno lifted his head from the seat, watching her. Not questioning, not urging, just there. "You knew, didn't you?" she said quietly, resting her hand against his shoulder. His ears shifted slightly. That was all. Eleanor stepped out of the truck. The air carried the faint scent of damp earth and wood again, but it didn't feel heavy now. It felt familiar. She walked toward the house, not as someone passing through, as someone arriving. The door opened easily this time. Inside, the house greeted her the same way it always had. Quiet, steady, unchanged. But she moved through it differently. Slower. Her hand brushed along the wall as she passed, not testing it, not questioning it, acknowledging it. The hallway didn't pull at her the same way. The locked door there didn't feel like a warning. Just another piece of something she would come back to when the time was right. Bruno followed close behind, relaxed. For the first time, he didn't stop to watch the shadows or the corners. He simply stayed near her. Eleanor set the bundle of papers down on the table, carefully. Then she stood there for a long moment, looking at them, at everything they represented. Names, decisions, lives, not abstract, not distant, real. She unwrapped them again, this time with purpose. Spread a few pages out. Read, slowly. The handwriting was steady, consistent, practical. No extra words, no explanations, just records. What was needed? Who had come? What had been done? It wasn't written for anyone else to understand. It was written so it wouldn't be forgotten. Eleanor traced one of the names with her finger. then another. She didn't know any of them, but that didn't matter. They had passed through this place because someone had made sure they could. A soft sound pulled her attention back. Bruno had moved to the doorway, sitting with his back straight, his gaze turned outward toward the clearing. Watching. Not tense, just aware. Eleanor followed his gaze. Nothing moved, but the stillness no longer felt empty. It felt held. Like the house, the land, everything around it had been carrying something for a long time, waiting for someone to notice. Eleanor folded the papers again, wrapped them carefully, not as something fragile, as something important. She stepped outside. The sun had shifted lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. The shed stood where it always had, quiet, solid, no longer something to avoid. She walked toward it without hesitation. Bruno followed. No urgency, no searching, just presence. Inside, the air felt the same, but she didn't focus on the marks or the chains this time. She walked to the center, stood over the place where the hatch lay hidden beneath the boards. She didn't open it. Not yet. She didn't need to. She knew what was there, what had always been there. Instead, she turned slowly, taking in the space again, seeing it clearly. Not as something strange, not as something unsettling, but as something built, with intention, with care, for a reason. She stepped back outside, closed the door behind her. This time the sound didn't feel final. It felt settled. As she walked back toward the house, she spoke quietly. "I'm not selling it." The words landed easily. No resistance, no doubt. Bruno glanced up at her briefly, then continued walking. As if that had always been the answer. The next morning came with a different kind of energy. Eleanor woke early, not from restlessness, from clarity. She moved through the house with purpose, opened windows, let the air move through. She found tools tucked away in corners, well kept, preserved. She carried them outside, started with the porch, loose boards, minor repairs. Nothing overwhelming. Just work. Bruno stayed nearby, sometimes watching, sometimes lying in the grass, his head resting on his paws, at peace. By midday, a car pulled into the clearing. Eleanor looked up. Harold stepped out. He didn't speak right away, just took in the scene, the open windows, the tools, the movement. "You're staying," he said finally. Eleanor wiped her hands on her jeans. "For now," she replied. Harold nodded slowly. Didn't question it. "People are talking," he said. "I figured. They're not avoiding it this time." Eleanor met his gaze. "That's a start." Harold looked toward the shed, then back at her. "She mattered," he said. Eleanor nodded. "I know." He lingered a moment longer, then turned back toward his car. "Let me know if you need anything," he added. Eleanor watched him go, not surprised, not unsettled, just aware that something had shifted, not just for her, for them, for the town, for what had been left unsaid for too long. As the afternoon light stretched across the clearing, Eleanor sat on the porch steps. Bruno lay beside her. The house stood behind them, solid, steady. The forest moved quietly at the edges. Nothing urgent, nothing pressing, just present. Eleanor rested her hands in her lap, looked out at the land, and for the first time since arriving, she wasn't thinking about leaving. She wasn't thinking about what had been lost or what had gone wrong. She was thinking about what remained and what she would do with it. Because some things aren't meant to be closed. They're meant to be carried, not as burdens, but as responsibility. Not loud, not obvious, but steady. The way her grandmother had carried it, the way the house had held it, and now, the way she would. Bruno shifted slightly, pressing closer to her side. Eleanor rested her hand on his back, and together they sat there, not waiting, not searching, just staying.
Bruno played near the doorway now, the same place he had kept watching since the first night. The place he almost ignored. His breathing was slow, steady, like whatever had brought him here was finally at rest. Eleanor looked around the house, really looked this time. The walls her grandmother had built, the careful details she once dismissed, the quiet that no longer felt distant, but earned. She talked about how easier she could have shown it, how close she came to walking away without ever knowing. But Bruno hadn't. He didn't understand his story or silence or the way of choices people never talk about. He just knew something here mattered, and he stayed with it until she did too. Eleanor rested her hand gently on his back. "You didn't let me miss it," she said softly. "Sometimes what changes our lives isn't what we find, it's whether we are willing to stay long enough to understand it. So tell me, have you ever had a moment where something just didn't feel right, but you almost walked away anyway?"